Hello, thanks for joining me. Today we're going to be discussing how to use ImagePro's reporting feature. ImagePro contains tools that make it easy for you to make reports that can be saved in PDF or Microsoft Word compatible formats. Reports can contain images, metadata, measurements, and those measurements can be organized in various formats such as tables, graphs, histograms, or pie charts. You have the ability to customize reports or make novel reports from scratch, which is what I'm going to do during this video. Now, I have three images open here. Each has got measurements made, so I've segmented some objects and I've measured class name, area, perimeter, and intensity of each of my objects. And what I'd like to do is I'd like to make a report that includes the image showing my segmented objects and my measurements data. So if we go to the Review tab, this is where we find the report tools. And if I click here under template, you can find that we have some predefined templates that you may wish to use. But what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to choose to make a new template. I'm going to make a novel report. So I click on the new template button and I choose a file name under which I'm going to save it. So I'm going to call this one image and table, and ImagePro will take me to the report editing tools. So the report home tab looks nice and familiar to those of us who are used to working with Microsoft Office tools. And it contains a very useful hint, which is start here to select report data. So let's do that. And in the dialog that opens, we can see on the left hand side all the different data types that can be included in a report. And I want to include image data in mine, so I'm going to add that. Image data includes the image itself. And you may notice that as I add things to the selected report data, they become selectable in the left-hand column over here. So I also wanted to include my measurements, so I'm going to choose the measurements table and add that to my report. And I'm going to configure this to include statistics data. So I think for me it would be useful to include statistics on my measurements. So here we see the measurements that are currently open in the table on the active image, which are the area, the perimeter, and the intensity. And I'd like to see the mean of each. So if I organize each by mean and add all, then the mean statistics will be included. It would also be useful for me to include the sum. So let's add all organized by sum. And finally, the standard deviation. So let's add all organized by standard deviation. Okay, now I'm happy with the measurements available in my report. I can close this dialog. So at this stage, what I have is a list of selectable measurements types or selectable data types and a blank report. And I'm now going to start dragging my data types into my report. So I'm going to start by making a little bit of space at the top of my report, and I want to include my image view. So I select the image view and drag it into the report, and here we see a placeholder that shows my currently active image, and I can resize it if I wish. And I think I'd like it to be in the center of the report, so I'm going to select central justification, and there we see an image in the report. Next, I want to add my measurements data. So let's take a look at what we have available under this measurements turn down. And here I can see the data types of interest to me: area, intensity, perimeter, and class name. But I also see some data types that I don't wish to include in my report. So what I'll do now is, holding the control key, I'm going to select just the measurements that I'm interested in. So area, intensity, perimeter, and class name. And the order with which I select them is important because that's the order with which they'll be shown in the table. And I'm going to deselect this option to include the whole measurements table. I can now drag my measurements into my report. And there we see area, mean intensity, the bounding polygon, and the class name in my table. And in my report template here I see 20 measurement rows. It's just because it's a placeholder. When we actually make the report, we'll see all the measurements in the table. Okay, so I mentioned that I was also interested in including measurement statistics, which I find here under this turn down. And I think I want to include everything here, so I can just grab the measurement statistics table and drag it into the report. And there we see my area, intensity, perimeter, summarized by mean, sum, and standard deviation in my report. Now that I have all the data types of interest to me in my report, I'm going to edit the report to make it look a bit more bespoke, a bit more personal to my company. So I'm going to go to the top of the report and I'm going to select the insert option and I'm going to add a picture, which is going to be my company logo. So when I select the picture, I get the option to navigate my computer searching for images, and here's my company logo, which I'm going to open, and here we see it appear at the top of my report. So let's maybe just make a little bit more space for that, perhaps resize it a little bit, and I'm going to include some text as well. So this is going to be an imaging report made by Andrew. And let's make this text centrally justified. I'm going to change the font and the font size. Let's go a bit larger. Okay, so I've now got a report that I think I'm reasonably happy with. So I'm going to save it. And I can now close the report editing tools. Now back in the review tab, and this is where I get to use my newly created report. So over here in the reporting feature, I get to select the image that I want to use for my report. So let's use a different image to the one we used to make the report. And then we get to select our report. So here we see our newly created image and table report. So let's choose it. And let's make a preview of the report. So here we see the report preview, looking as we expect. At this stage we still only see the 20 rows as it's just a preview, but if we actually now save the report, and let's save it as a PDF, and we'll call this Acme report, and we'll save it to the desktop. Okay, so our report's now saved. Let's take a look at the actual final report. So here it is. Let's open it. And here we see our report looking as we expected. And here we see the full measurements table and our statistics at the end of the report. Thanks for watching. Please contact Media Cybernetics if you have any questions.